was never angry with you. I was sad because I was afraid you lost your way.
I did lose my way.
But you found it again.
Hello everyone and welcome to The Void Theater. As always, I'm your host Alexander, and I want to talk about villains. Or more specifically, the recent change in villains in animation. See, in recent years, we've seen what could be described only as a complete rehaul of how television handles villains. Whereas before villains were rather one-note straight to the point evil, we're now seeing a strong surge in the concept of the sympathetic or redemptive villain. Or villains who do bad things but either have good reasons behind them or make some compelling points that make you agree with them. Like I said, the concept's been around for ages, but has recently started blowing up in more modern animated series. Most notably shows like Steven Universe, where the core concept of the show was literally built on that singular idea. And while it may be the more obvious one, it's far from the only culprit. But that does make me wonder, what's wrong with just being evil? Because the truth is that the more I watch shows like Steven Universe, the more I notice that for a lot of these shows, it feels like the focus on making a sympathetic villain overshadows actually trying to make that concept fit into the idea of the story that they're telling. So, let's go over it. When the trend of redemptive villains started, why the trend became so popular, whether or not all villains can be redeemed, and most importantly, try to figure out if this trend is actually a good one for the future of animation. And as always, if you enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe for more content like this. But without any further ado, let's raise the curtain and begin the show. Alright, so the best place to start is going to be in figuring out where the whole redemptive villain thing really started. Now obviously I don't mean in general because I clearly haven't existed since the dawn of time, but the question is important. When did redemptive villains become so popular in modern animation? And it's weird because there are two real answers. Now to clarify, when I'm talking about modern animation, I'm going off anywhere in the last 20 years, so early 2000s to current year. And at that time, I can only think of two shows that were intensely heavy-handed with this concept. The first being Avatar: The Last Airbender, and the second being My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. Yeah, that's right, I'm digging up that grave. But in all seriousness, these two are arguably the biggest influences for this trend, albeit in different ways. Whereas Friendship is Magic took the route akin to Steven Universe, where they tried to portray every villain as evil with possible good in them, Avatar went in the more typical direction of focusing on one singular character and building them up over the course of the show, and then letting that evolve naturally when the time feels right. Like I said, same end goal, but very different styles of how to approach it. Now to clarify, I'm not saying that these two shows were the definitive beginning of this trend, but what I am saying is that they more than likely played a significant part in it. Especially Avatar, because when it comes to redemptive villains, Zuko is usually at the top of everybody's list of the trope. You type in redemptive villains in Google and the top results are Avatar and MLP. So I don't think it's unfair to say they had more than a fair bit of influence on the genre. But that does answer the question of what made this trend so popular, because these two shows were incredibly influential in animation history. Depending on who you talk to, Avatar is one of, if not the most iconic piece of animation media ever to exist. This show did what Adventure Time did before Adventure Time was a thing. It literally built the foundation on which half of the cartoons we watch today came from. There's a reason why Nickelodeon is still trying to milk it. But above everything else that the show did, what it perfected was its characters and their arcs. Like I said, Zuko basically defined the idea of a redeemable villain to the finest point imaginable. His entire story is what most shows strive to accomplish with their takes on the genre. It's a long, winding road with a payoff that we see every step of to justify its existence. It's an arc with a purpose that reflects the character it's for. And on the other hand, we have Friendship is Magic, which while not as prolific in what it did with its character arcs, did attempt to try the same thing. Like Steven Universe, Friendship is Magic attempted a more modern approach to the entire redeemed villain trope, and the idea of everyone can be redeemed with enough effort. And while I'll get into why I don't like this approach to the trope in a bit, I will admit that out of all the shows to pull it off, Friendship is Magic is one of the better ones to attempt it, and it's mainly due to how the show balances it out. In Friendship is Magic, a major part of the show is about trying to redeem everyone, sure, but it also doesn't jump straight into that and lets the characters breathe and registers them as villains. Take Twilight meeting Discord for the first time. The show doesn't jump into the idea of rehabilitation first, it has episodes where Twilight recognizes the danger Discord poses to Equestria. The show allows him to be an antagonist first that they deal with for a few episodes, and then they try a redemption arc. And that in and of itself spans a few episodes. But it works because of that. By allowing Discord to flex just how powerful and evil he is, you start to feel how dangerous he is, but also how strong he would be as an ally. And by allowing that space of seeing his change, you can feel the character progression from villain to hero. It allows you, the viewer, to see the change in real life and go, oh, I see where they're going with this. It's nothing flashy, but it doesn't need to be to make it work. But that brings us back to the question of what made these two iconic redemptive villains work. And more importantly, why don't the more recent attempts succeed nearly as well? And the answer is context. See, aside from everything else I just said about these two characters, the most important thing they have is context. For Zuko, the context was painting him as more of a tragic figure than a straight villain. From the very beginning, we're always shown that there's some bigger bad far worse than him, be it the general, his sister, or his father. We're shown true evil, and when you compare it to Zuko's actions, they're not nearly as bad. So his redemption made sense because you could always see the bigger threat. And in the case of Discord, he had the benefit of frankly just being silly. Now make no mistake, Discord in theory is a terrifying concept. He's a lord of chaos, a being of unnatural order who realistically, if allowed, would warp reality beyond our imagination. But the thing is, he talks and acts like a Disney villain. I'm serious, real quick, out loud, say that you're gonna drown the world in chaos. See, when you say that out loud, you sound like Jafar from Aladdin. But that's my point. Yes, Discord is a very real and very serious threat, but because of how he's written and how he acts, it's far more believable that he could be redeemed. Which brings us back to now, and the issue with modern redeemable villains. So just to spare us all the headache, let's rip the band-aid off and talk about White Diamond. Because, of course, we're going to talk about White Diamond. So before we deal with all that, let me make this clear. I genuinely like Steven Universe as a show. I also, unironically, like White Diamond and the Diamond Authority in general. To me, they represent the same thing that Fire Lord Ozai did. This almost JRPG style larger than life big bad. You fought their minions, you saw their generals, even their second in commands, but now you have to face the Demon Kings themselves. And White Diamond's introduction parrots that perfectly. Steven slowly being brought to her and just looking up and up and up, only to be met with these blank, unfeeling eyes and this smile that's just for show. It paints her as someone who's human only in her design. To me, White Diamond is a perfect representation of what an alien who's trying to look human would be like. A creature that gets the look down, but not the emotions or the mindset. So if I'm giving all this praise to White Diamond, what's my issue with her? Well, the truth is that White Diamond's character and her arc is one of Steven Universe's biggest black spots. And I think that has to do with the fact that she's portrayed as a character that can be redeemed. Now I know what you're thinking. I gave Discord, someone who intends to warp all reality to some nightmare scenario pass, but White Diamond doesn't get one. Well, the thing about making a character, or in this case a villain, redeemable, is that at the core of the concept, the villain can't be doing things that are too real. Characters like Zuko and Blue and Yellow Diamond work because we as the viewer understand they're operating out of fear of a higher authority. For Zuko, his sister and his father, and for the Diamonds, White herself. They can be redeemed because you understand they're acting out of fear of retaliation from someone far stronger than them. It gives them a sympathy angle. In the same vein, Discord works because, like I said, he's insanely evil, but he's old school Disney evil. What he wants to do would realistically destroy the world, but it feels so over the top you can't help but laugh. Funny enough, we do actually get a more realistic version of Discord that kind of proves this little theory. His name's the Lich. Seriously, really compare them and they bear some striking similarities in their endgames. The only difference is the Lich doesn't incorporate a dance routine in his evil, so he comes off as more realistic and terrifying. But where am I going with all this? Well, White Diamond has what could be considered a major design flaw. In her concept, she's designed to essentially be this be-all, end-all final boss. But the creator and staff wanted her to go through a redemption arc. Everything about her feels like it was designed for a character who was supposed to be entirely evil. It also doesn't help that unlike other redeemable villains, her actions are honestly insanely realistic. It's why a character like Ozai was just locked away instantly despite the show having an entire episode dedicated to the idea that no one's fight in a war is ever truly justified. Because while not impossible, it's rather hard to forgive the concept of genocide. So when you see her not only go through a redemption arc, but a rushed half-baked one, you can't help but think it feels off-putting. And yes, I know that the show is supposed to have more seasons than what they were given, and realistically at least one of them would have focused on fleshing that arc out and then refining it, and I do think that could have worked. It would have been hard as hell considering the crimes, but it could have worked. The issue is we don't have that luxury, so we have to make do with what we do have, and what we have is a character that in everything from looks to personalities feels like she was meant to be a full-fledged villain. So that brings us to the final question. Is this trope good for the future of animation? And objectively, yes. Anything that can increase the way a story can be told is objectively good for the medium. The problem is that it doesn't really seem like a lot of new creators know how to actively use it. Because the truth is, despite my reliance on using Steven Universe as the punching bag here, it's far from the only show to try and apply it recently, and also far from the only one to fail with it. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the more modern shows have a very all or nothing to it. Either every character is worthy of redemption, or no character is. And while that could work for some shows, clearly it doesn't work for all of them. And also, there's no harm in just having an evil character be evil. Not every character needs a tragic backstory, not every character needs a second chance. Sometimes villains are just villains, and that's okay. There's a reason why a character like Jack Horner became so popular after Puss in Boots. He's a concept of a genuinely evil character done perfectly. There's no remorse for him, there's no sympathy. He's evil just because he enjoys it, and it works for what they're trying to do. But with other shows, it reminds me a lot of what Hank Hill said.
Ugh. Can't you see you're not making Christianity better, you're just making rock and roll worse?
And in this case, you're not making something better, you're just replacing one trope for another. But with that, we come to the current call on this Void Thoughts video on redeemable villains. Not gonna lie, I miss these, I might start bringing them back more often. But with the curtain drawn, I'll leave you with some questions. What do you think about sympathetic villains as a whole? And do you think they're becoming overused in animation and media in general? Leave a comment letting me know what you think, and be sure to subscribe for more content like this. But until next time, I've been your host Alexander, and I hope to see you back in my theater.